So I'm wanting to do a quick tutorial for the upcoming class, my pointed flower class for this quilt at the Cedar City Quilt Retreat at the end of January. And I just wanted to go over a few quick things pertinent to the class. So when you order the stamp kit comes in a box, and when you open, the ink pad is dry. And it comes with 2 inks, and it'll take about 3/4 of a bottle to fill the ink pad the first time. And then once you've filled it, and you're going to fill it by just squirting it out and going back and forth until it's fairly saturated. And then every time you use your ink pad, if you just take and do the same thing and go back and forth, squeezing on the bottle and wetting it up again, then it's ready to use again. And then always store it in a Ziploc bag with the lid closed, and it'll stay good for a long time. And I've never had one dry out when I've done that, and I've used the same one over and over and over again. So we're going to start by showing you how to ink and stamp this large piece, which is the pointed, what I call the pointed Hexyz. And there's different ways to do this. So choosing fabric can be really important. So I like to work the bigger pieces. I will work with the largest prints. And this is a large, what I consider a large print, and it's packed fairly tight. And so you don't have to fussy stamp or anything like that. And all you're going to do is stamp on the back side. And on this particular piece, I don't like to waste any fabric. So what I'm going to do is just dip my stamp into the ink pad. And I'm going to use my edges as a guide. And when I mount my stamps, I always mount one edge. And then I can sort of keep things a little bit straight. And then I'm going to just keep stamping across. And on these pieces, I like to intertwine them a little bit so I'm getting the maximum amount of use on my fabric. And because you can see through the stamp, you can line up one edge, drop one corner, and then drop your next corner. And then you've got your edges fairly tight together. It takes a little bit of practice, but I like to save fabric. And then I'm going to just keep stamping that way, drop one corner, drop my next corner, and press. And then I'll just come back. You can come back either with a rotary cutter, or I like to sit at the couch and just cut. And I'm going to just keep stamping all the way across this piece. Same method. Yeah, lining up those edges. And then it's ready to cut. Now, if you choose an even bigger print, there's other ways to go about it. So this is another print I've used in other projects. And on a print like this, I wouldn't necessarily fussy cut, but I would do what I consider centering. So I would take and find a place and center the flower and just sort of experiment a little bit. And I like how that looks with that leaf pointed to the top. And I'm going to do that on every one of those pieces and just sort of center at the same location, centering this large flower. And then when you cut it out, you've got that flower centered in there. And because you don't want a lot of open space in that piece. So the next method would be to actually do what I consider fussy stamping. And this to me is fun. It's time consuming, but I like it. And I like how it looks with your pieces. So this is one of the flowers I've done. You can see how, because I've stamped at the same location on that, when I sew it, you get that kaleidoscope effect around your center and a circular pattern. And so you can see this print here, and it has several flowers. And on this, I've stamped this same flower. So on fabrics like this, you've got to buy quite a bit of fabric, typically about a yard, to get your repeats over and over again. But I will literally use every square inch on this, because once I've cut these big flowers out, I will come with a little Hexyz and center these little flowers and then use them in another project. And so, because I have 3 sizes of my Hexyz stamps. And so I'm going to show you just from the back side how this works. And this is the flower that we used on that particular print here. You can see that same, and then you roll it over, you can see it from the back side. So what I like to do is I will first cut one flower out, and I'm going to show you this in a different color. And then when you can see how I've cut one out here. Then when I've cut it out, I'm going to use this one. You can either try and match the same points, but I found I want to be really particular, so I've really centered this where I want and get that kaleidoscope effect. And so I'm going to actually cut one out where I've stamped it, and then you can see how I can line up the edges of that same flower print and line up all of the design. And then I'm going to take a marker and just mark my points. And you can use a marker or a pencil. I'm going to show you with this. This isn't the marker I would normally use, but I want you to be able to see. And I'm going to mark my corners like this. And then lift it up. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back and I'm going to line up my point, and I'm going to drop one point and center in between those points. And then I'm going to do that and repeat. This flower again repeats over here, right here. And I'm going to do the same thing. I will just center and mark up those points. And stamp. And this is really time consuming, but the quilt look that you get when you have all of those flowers centered on a design will be amazing. And I want to just show you a couple of them that I've done. So this one, in fact, this one wasn't even a big flower in the center. This was just some of the leaves with a little flower. But you still get this fun kaleidoscope effect by experimenting with it. And this is another one. I used just the little flowers in there and centered them, and you get that repeat pattern. And it really makes for some beautiful blocks to do it that way. So the centers to me on that particular pattern, on the pointed flower pattern, are really important on picking a good fabric. And then once you've done that, then the other pieces are a lot easier. So the other piece that we have in that set is your Hexyz. And there's going to be a lot of Hexyz. So, again, I'm always lining up that edge of the stamp to one of the edges on the block. And on this, I just take a fat quarter, and I always press my fabric and use a good starch so that it's sort of stiff and all your wrinkles are out of it. And then you're just going to start stamping. And I like to just stamp and use up and fill the space as much as possible. Same method, I'm going to try and line up this edge and just keep stamping, and then I'm going to just intertwine them here to save fabric. And then I'll get a sheet of them stamped and then just cut them out while I'm sitting watching my favorite show. So in this particular pattern, there's going to be a lot of these small diamonds. And one of the easiest way to cut these small diamonds out is to cut your strips, and you're going to cut them so they're about 1/8 inch bigger than your piece as you lay them out. And again, on all my pieces, I like to lay my edge, one edge of the stamp up against the block, and then I'm going to start laying this out. I use my edge and just stamp one edge. And if you don't want to get something dirty, just place a piece of paper underneath, because you're going to stamp right at that edge. And if you do, then that is less cutting that you have to do. And I'm dropping one corner, lining up that other edge, and dropping the next corner. And you're just going to repeat that process all the way across, making sure your edges are lining up. And to me, lining up this edge is the most important. It's a lot less cutting if you can line up your edges. And just keep going. If you get off a little bit, you can come down and line up more on this edge. And keep stamping all the way across. So the other one that you also use in this, we're going to use a few of the triangles. Same thing. You're going to line up one edge. And same thing, this isn't going to be the right size, but you're going to cut your fabric about 1/8 inch bigger than the height of your stamp. And then just start stamping across. Lining up your edges as you go. And then cut and cut. There you go.